G'day guys, welcome to episode 104 of Ask Jack D. Today I take a question about what trends am I following in Australia. The answer is none, and here's why.
28 and I'm trying to shape history, pulling from the sky for some strength to take with me. Line up the stars, fly away quickly and push the world forward like a tidal wave hit me. I ride the wave swiftly, I fear no man. Check my titles, mate, quickly.
G'day guys, welcome to episode 104 where we now have the audio switched on so you'll be able to hear what I'm saying. We've just filmed half the episode and then we realised that the mic wasn't on. So we stopped and we've had to start again. Let's roll some footage without the mic on. This is what, had our cameraman not have picked up the error, this is what the episode would have been like. Not a great deal of fun when there's no audio coming through. Episode 104, thank you for tuning in. Happy Thursday to everybody out there. Still at my place in Mossman, still writing this next book, which will be out next April, called Unwritten, Reinvent Tomorrow. It's coming along really nicely, so stay tuned for all of that. We'll start making noise about it in the new year. Today's question, episode 104, comes from a guy called Stefan, who says, Jack Delosa, Jack and Gary. This must have been pre-Gary Vaynerchuk interview, which is good. So, Stephen, I'll tell you what, I'll answer this question. We will also rally to see if we can get Gary to also answer this question. Jack and Gary, what trends are you guys watching in the Australian market right now and why? Hashtag AskJackD, hashtag AskGaryV. Awesome, really good question. What trends am I watching? None. I don't watch trends. I do obsess about different industries and different spaces, the main one obviously being education in my instance, but I'm not just interested in what's happening right now, because that's a very short-term view where if we only have the history of what's gone on in a particular space from, let's say, a year ago, and we're only looking forward to, let's say, the next year or even 5, it's a very short-term window that doesn't, from a history standpoint, doesn't really give us much insight or data or nuance to be able to make informed decisions about what the future might look or how we can reinvent the future. And looking forward only to the degree of how long will this latest trend last doesn't give us a long enough foresight to do anything truly meaningful that will be truly disruptive and truly impactful, right? So I obsess about education, but right back to, like, I obsess about when was education invented, right? So like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And why was it invented, and how did it evolve from, you know, being villages of people where the elders would talk to the youngers and would educate them verbally, and then there became the population, like the size of each village or the size of each tribe grew to such a degree that verbal communication wouldn't cut it anymore, so they needed to come up with symbols, and that's how writing became invented. Writing was always just a function of education. And education was initially about to draw out from within, to draw out somebody's passions or talents or interests, and to help them develop more of, and to help them develop all of that and help them to grow into more of themselves. Somewhere along the line, then Plato became the first curriculum, the same first philosopher or person to develop what we would call a curriculum-based education. Around Shakespeare's time, education changed from being to draw out from within to being the transfer of information. The second half of the 20th century, I think education forgot what it was there to do. I think in the first half of this century, it's become even worse. I can tell you that 53% of people that come out of higher education are unemployed or underemployed, meaning they don't have a job or they're working in a job that doesn't require them to have the degree they just spent 5 or 6 years getting. And therefore, for the first time in history, higher education and education at large is ripe for disruption. And then, so that's history, right? And then looking forward, I'm looking forward probably 40 years in terms of, who will, the world's best and most innovative and effective education institutions 10 years from now, what will they look like? 20 years from now, what do I think will happen in the industry? And, you sort of go from there. So the window in which I view any trend is not what's happening this month or this year. It's like what's happened from 1,000 years ago up until, maybe 30 or 40 years in the future, because it gives you a greater data set and a greater insight to sort of elevate above and rise above anything that's going on right now. So my advice is don't obsess over what trends are happening at any given moment. What's far better to do is work out who you are, what lights you up, what you're passionate about, what you can draw out from within of yourself, what you would be happy to make your life's work. If you were to decide, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to do, this is the person I want to become, this is the legacy I want to leave, and if I can do that really, really well for the rest of my life, then I will consider that a successful and happy and fulfilled life. Then you follow that rather than following external trends or what's going on for 5 minutes. One of the greatest interviews I've ever watched was Steve Forbes, the founder of Forbes magazine, interviewing Jay-Z and Warren Buffett, right? So he's sitting, like Steve Forbes, one of the most renowned media people in the world, sitting Jay-Z and Warren Buffett down in the same interview. So Jay-Z's obviously an African-American rapper who grew up in Brooklyn in the projects, had to do a lot of illegal and questionable stuff in order to get his foundation, and now he's built, an incredible empire of music, signing other musicians, clothing, alcohol, nightclubs, you name it, and is now achieved an iconic level of success. Then you take Warren Buffett, who's from Omaha, obviously a white guy, born into into relatively good money, goes to college, learns about stocks, learns about numbers, all of this sort of stuff, and he is now considered one of the most successful investors in the world, and has also reached an iconic level of success. So you've got two people coming from, you couldn't be different in where they've come from and therefore who they should be on a surface level, right? So as I at the beginning of this interview, I'm thinking, anything that these two agree on with regards to what makes somebody successful and impactful and influential, I'm going to fucking write down, because if two people can come from such different backgrounds and still agree on different principles and consistencies of what makes somebody successful, then I'm just going to take that as absolute truth. I'm going to take that as fact. And like, watch the interview. It's on YouTube. Just Google Forbes, Jay-Z, Warren Buffett. They pretty much agree on everything. And the main consistent theme that flows through the entire interview is that neither of them ever followed trends, which takes discipline. In Jay-Z's industry and field, it was, one summer, they're doing 808s and auto-tune and they're singing, or they're wearing fluoro-coloured pants, or like literally, and there's always these trends that are going on for 5 minutes, and Jay-Z's always sort of had the sense of self to go, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to play that, I'm just going to remain true to who I am and keep doing my thing, I'm going to keep doing me, and I'll see where that takes me. For Warren Buffett, it's like CFDs and options trading, and even like tech companies. Buffett doesn't invest in what he calls outside of his circle of competence. So he invests in like Wrigley's chewing gum, because he says the internet isn't going to change the way we chew gum. So I'll invest in that. And he invests in Gillette, because he says, well, every night there's 3 billion men going to sleep over the planet whose facial hair is growing, and the internet's not going to change the way they shave. So completely different approaches, but the number one thing that they agreed on is that when other people and other companies were going and following trends, they were always staying truly consistent to who they are, what they're good at, and what's important to them. And for both industries, particularly music in Jay-Z's instance, it doesn't lend itself to longevity. It doesn't lend itself to a sustained successful career. Jay-Z's had more #1 albums than anybody in history except for the Beatles, so more than any other solo artist. So in terms of longevity in a game which is really hard to sustain success, he's done it, right? Like, he's probably, apart from the Beatles, #1. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, in not following trends, not allowing yourself to get pulled into the excitement of what's happening in any given moment, but rather, who am I? What am I here to do? What am I great at? What can I be the best in the world at? And I'm going to consistently work at being the best. I'm going to consistently work at staying true to who I am. And I believe that when you follow a path alongside those sorts of philosophies, that's when you do something that's truly great.